I used to think I wasn't into horror because I tended to find horror movies more boring and frankly kind of laughable. And then I watched Hereditary by Ari Aster, directed by Ari Aster, and that scared the shit out of me. And then I thought that I wasn't into horror in book form because I'd read a couple and I'd read Stephen King, the master of horror himself, a few by him. And while I'd enjoyed a few of those books, they didn't really scare me either. Well, this kind of scared the shit out of me. And I think I might be into horror after all. Welcome back to StoryTube. Today I'm here to talk about The Troop by Nick Cutter. And in my limited experience with horror, I have come to learn that horror can be quite a tricky genre to recommend because, as with all books, I think it's about what you want out of it. But even if you know what a person wants out of it, like if what you want out of horror is to be truly unsettled and scared, which I would assume you do want, it's still an extremely personal experience in terms of what is it that you find scary and creepy. Because you might pick up a horror book and find it perfectly well written and enjoy it, and it might even be a book that you really like, but it might not be what you want in a horror novel specifically. When I say that I haven't been exposed to that much horror, or that I haven't been scared by that much horror specifically in books, but that this scared me, it doesn't mean that you will have the same experience. But I will aim to tell you a little bit about this book, and maybe that will help you judge for yourself. So The Troop by Nick Cutter, a little bit of context. I had heard about this a few years ago, and I had heard that it involved some body horror. So just potentially, this is just my impression at the time, creepy things happening to somebody's body and like parasites and things being deformed and like that kind of thing that is just extremely unsettling. And just the thought of that I found unsettling, which made me think, okay, this might be the horror book that does it for me, that actually makes me feel unsettled and uncomfortable. And that is what you want from horror, right? Because otherwise you could be reading any other genre. So one of the problems that I have with horror movies, and that kind of extends to books as well, is that you'll have the creepy setup and devices, but I don't quite feel those emotions because I don't care about the characters, because I find that a lot of the time the characters are a bit cut and dry and just there to be vessels for you to experience the story in. But if I don't care about the characters, I'm not rooting for the characters, I don't quite empathize, and then I'm just looking at it from above and I don't quite get immersed, and I don't feel like I'm participating in the events, if that makes sense. Nick Cutter did get me invested in the characters, and that is a huge element of why this book was so creepy. So what's it about? Basically, we follow a group of Boy Scouts. They're about 14 years old, and they're Canadian, and they're going on a weekend trip to a deserted island close to where they're from with their small town doctor who is their scoutmaster. So there's 6 people, and they go to this island. They're staying there for I think it's literally 2 nights for a weekend. And on the first night, a stranger appears. And this stranger is extremely hungry. And he needs to be fed. And the scoutmaster, who is a doctor, wants to help this person who he instinctively knows is not okay. There's something wrong with this hunger. But there's also something contagious, potentially, about it. And things very, very quickly escalate out of his control. And it's cleverly interspersed with bits of media, of interviews, of articles, of newspaper clippings, of things like that, that make the reader just learn a little bit about the situation, which is more at times than the people in the situation know. but it's paced very, very cleverly to create an extra level of dread, but you never quite know too much to take away the tension. What you know is always adding more and more tension. And I think it's extremely well done. He actually says in the acknowledgements that he's inspired by the way Stephen King did that in Carrie, which I have not read, but I'm just saying it because he said it. But that's the basic setup of the plot. Honestly, it's paced like a thriller. It's extremely fast paced. There's constantly stuff happening, and you have this very basic setup of you have a group of people in a specific place that they cannot escape, and then one by one they're exposed to the bad thing, right? To just keep it really vague. I think that just triggers something instinctive in like some survival instinct or something. It just connects with something, but it also is immediately engaging because you want to know. It's kind of like that murder mystery setup or crime thriller setup of something happened and we need to know why and how and who did it. So it's kind of similar in that way, not exactly like that, but it does have a very thriller-like structure that I really enjoyed. But he gives you glimpses of all 5 of the boys and also a scoutmaster that make them very real characters, and I enjoyed that. I thought it was well done, but also it just contributed to the sense of dread because you don't want bad things to happen to these boys, but you know they will because that is the nature of the novel. So it makes you root for them, and then you get this, like what I mentioned, this information that they don't have, and that just makes you dread for them even more. And I just thought it was really clever. And on top of that, I think the thing for horror with me is that a lot of the time there's a supernatural element to it. And I don't dislike that per se, but that takes me out of the horror aspect a tiny bit. Because if it's something that I don't believe or I can't fully believe would happen, I will be more aware that this is a story. So I might be scared for the characters, but I'm not going to be scared myself, if that makes sense. And this is kind of a clever middle ground where we're more in the Michael Crichton area, if that makes sense, in terms of this is not necessarily a real thing, but it's more of a cautionary tale of where science could go as opposed to ghosts or something paranormal. And that just works better for me because I find it more believable, I find it more real, and something that could actually theoretically happen or that I can imagine happening, and that just scares me more. On top of that, you just have that element of body horror that makes my skin crawl, and all of that together just really, really, really worked for me. I thought this was a great book. I could not stop reading it, but at the same time, once I got to the halfway point, I couldn't read more than like 30 or 40 pages without putting the book down and just taking a breather. That is how much it got to me and how effective it was and what it was trying to do. If I were to have one criticism of it, it's that there's a certain element of it that I thought was a little bit over the top, which I don't think is uncommon for horror in this specific way. I don't want to say exactly what it was, but I thought it could have been a little bit more interesting if it was a tiny bit more subtle. However, I understood why he went for it the way he did, and it did cause some extra little bit of terror. So I didn't not like it, I thought it could have been a little bit more interesting if it was slightly different. I did think it might knock off like half a star for me for a while, but then when I finished the book, I honestly know this is a 5-star book experience because I kind of felt the way I felt when I read The Calculating Stars for science fiction. So I thought I didn't like science fiction. I thought that I wasn't into the sterile spaceship environment. And then I read The Calculating Stars and it ignited this excitement for space that I hadn't felt since I was a kid. And I realized that I did like science fiction. I just had a skewed and very, very specific idea of what it was. And I think that the troupe kind of did that for horror for me, where something just clicked into place and it made me realize what horror can do and what kind of horror works for me and what I will be looking for in the future. And that doesn't mean it'll do it for you if you feel that way about horror. But maybe there's a specific type of horror or a specific niche or a writing style or whatever it is that will do it for you. So I thought it was an interesting book to talk about and just something that I was very excited to talk about. And also I finished it a couple of days ago and I haven't stopped talking about it, thinking about it, and just there's moments where I'm by myself and it's dark and something brushes my foot or my ankle and the cats are nowhere to be seen. Now it's actually a blanket, but there's a split second where I'm just like, hi, ugh. And that is just all you can really want, isn't it, from a horror novel. So The Troop, I would absolutely recommend it to anyone who's into horror. If you think you don't like horror because you're too scared by it, then don't pick this up, because this is really, really creepy and unsettling. And just by the time I finished it, I just felt like I had ants crawling all over my skin and I wanted to swat them away. And I was just like, just yikes, ew, oh my God, oh. And I realized that none of those were actual words, but I didn't have any coherent words. It was just this sense of wanting to shake something off that was under my skin. And it's nice that it's a book and you get to put it down, but you still get to experience that. And I think that's what horror is all about. And I don't think that had clicked into place for me in book form until reading this. So that is The Troop by Nick Cutter. I absolutely loved it, even though it was horrible. Let me know if you read it. Let me know what you think. If you did read it, did you like it? Did you not like it? And give me any horror recommendations. Is there anything similar that you think I might like based on this? I would love to know. I will chat to you in the comments. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.